Listen to part of a lecture in a biology class.
By studying the fossil record, we can read the history of life on Earth. Interestingly enough, it appears that there are long periods in which not very much change occurs, then sporadic brief periods in which there are mass extinctions of species, followed by diversification of the groups that survived. How does this happen? Well, sometimes a habitat's destroyed or the environment changes. Did you know that if the temperature of the ocean falls by even a few degrees, many species will die? Incredible, isn't it? Or, even when the environment's relatively stable, biological conditions can change when other species evolve in different directions. For example, let's see, when a similar species evolves by developing a shell, then the related species without shells may be more vulnerable to predators and could become extinct as a result of changes in the other species. So you can see that extinction's a natural consequence of history. It's, well, inevitable. But sometimes mass extinctions occur and most of the known species are lost. And this is very different. Let me mention two such mass extinctions. First, the Permian mass extinction, which occurred about 250 million years ago. According to fossil records, more than 90% of the marine species and about 30% of the orders of insects perished. Then about 65 million years ago, the Cretaceous mass extinction claimed more than half of the marine species and many terrestrial species of plants and animals, including the dinosaurs. So what causes mass extinction? This isn't an easy question to answer. You see, it's obvious from the fossil records that species exist during a certain geological time period, and then they disappear. And we have solid evidence for that. But why they disappear is, well, more speculative. In the Permian, several extreme conditions may have converged, including the merging of the continents into one large landmass. As you can imagine, such a radical change in the distribution of land and water would have disturbed habitats and caused the climate to change. There's also evidence that volcanic activity during this period may have produced enough carbon dioxide to cause global warming, which in turn would have affected the temperature and depth of the oceans. And I'm referring here to global warming, so it probably also caused the oxygen levels in the oceans to decrease. All of these conditions could have converged to extinguish an enormous number of species at the same time. That's mass extinction. And a similar set of conditions may also have contributed to the mass extinction in the Cretaceous period as well. We can gather data that convinces us about continental drift, that it occurred along with receding seas along the continental coastlines. In addition, we know that cooler climate was probably the result, at least in part, of increased volcanic eruptions, and these eruptions probably released enough material into the atmosphere to block the sunlight. Having said all of that, many scientists now favor a very different hypothesis. They theorize that maybe a large asteroid collided with the Earth. Advocates of the so-called impact hypothesis speculate that there were two events that caused the mass extinction. First, the impact probably caused a firestorm of such proportion that most of the life in North America would have been decimated within minutes. Second, they postulate that an enormous cloud of fallout could have blocked out the sunlight, and that the impact was, in fact, large enough to darken the Earth. And we're talking about months or even years. So the result of the darkness, that would have caused a reduction in photosynthesis, which in turn would have created a disruption in the food chain. Now, such a disruption would have affected many species. So the advocates of the impact hypothesis, they put forward evidence that a thin layer of clay, rich in iridium deposits, can be found in the geologic material that separates the Mesozoic and the Cenozoic eras, precisely the time period for the Cretaceous mass extinction. So, what's special about this clay? Well, iridium's a very rare element on Earth, but it's quite common in meteorites and other extraterrestrial debris that's been analyzed. So it's possible that this sediment is the remains of the impact. The fact that there was more serious damage to the species in the Western Hemisphere could also be explained by the point of impact, and the fact that the dust cloud could have caused more acidic precipitation nearer the area of impact. Or there may have been a number of calamities that converged simultaneously, disrupting planetary balances. But whatever the cause or causes, the fact remains that the mass extinctions occurred, and they influenced the biological diversity of our planet in profound ways. The species that survived, whether because they had genetic advantages or because they were fortunate enough to be farther from the catastrophes, these species became the ancestors of the species that have played important roles in biological evolutionary history.